Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
Welcome to Getting to Know You. My name is Joe Nash. Today we're going to be talking about colonial maps of North America, and we have most of them are from our area. We have with us Wendy Birch once again from the Ten Brook Mansion, and Randy Patten, map enthusiast, as how you're described, and I looked up some articles on you, so why don't we start there with Randy. What's a map enthusiast?
Well, it's, as you can see,
we're going to be showing a lot of the maps.
For me, it comes down to an interest and love for history. And the maps basically are just another dimension of what you might read in history, an actual physical piece of evidence from that period of time that was utilized. So for me, it's new discovery. Every new map that I acquire usually has some tidbit of information that I wasn't aware of.
And you were telling me before we started, you have a couple hundred maps. They're mainly colonial era, colonial United States, more or less? Okay.
That's correct.
And many of them deal with the French and Indian. I should mention you were also a reenactor for French and Indian War days, and a lot of your maps are that era, 1755, 17?
Yes.
Okay.
Mid-1750s right to the mid-60s.
Okay. Now, recently, a lot of Randy's maps were over at the Prine House, and they're currently down at the Ten Brook Mansion across the street. It's called
King's Place.
King's Place, right across the street. They're going to be there through June. So, Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the setup down there and what people will see when they're down there?
Sure. We have this beautiful gallery space that's actually on North Swan Street, which is right around the corner from where the Ten Brook Mansion is. And it really lends itself to Randy's map exhibit. It's beautiful. There's tons of wall space. And so we've got the maps and, of course, the key to read the map. And you can spend as much time as you want wandering around and looking at it. Now, I will caution everyone that we're a little short-staffed over at the Ten Brook Mansion. So if it's at a time when we're not already in the space, if you would just call ahead and let us know you'd like to see the maps, or even just come over, we can probably arrange for people to get in to see.
And they're there through June or so?
Yep, through the end of June at least.
And how many maps? I know I was at the Prine House. It seemed like it was about 20 or 25. How many do you guys have down
48.
there? 48. 48?
Yep.
Okay. And I should say these are only a small number of his collection. Randy has, why don't you tell us, a lot of your maps are from the Library of Congress, the British Museum, and our own New York State Museum and Library. Tell us, before we get going on some specific ones and show them, tell us how where they're all from and what the
majority of the maps are from the Library of Congress.
Okay.
Fortunately, they have a tremendous collection there that's available to all of us online. You can look at all the collections online and download copies of it. If you want a higher resolution copy, you're going to have to order that special. Okay. It's about $18. They'll send it to you on a DVD or a CD. Most of the maps are beyond the copyrights, so you're free to make copies and reproduce them.
And that's what you've done. Why don't we start with this first one here?
Yes.
This is, you can sort of see the fold marks. And tell us a little bit about this map and what you...
Well, this map's unique in that it has sub-maps on a big map. Basically, this is a map of northern New York State, and you can see on the fringes there you have these sub-maps. On the far top right-hand corner there you have Albany.
Over in the upper right, yeah.
Yes. And then it goes down to Fort Edward, which is north of here on the Hudson River. Ticonderoga. Yeah, the stick would work probably. Crown Point, Fort St. Frederick, Montreal. The map of Albany is interesting because it actually has listings for streets.
Okay, I saw state streets on there.
Yeah, no state, but High Street. The map was made for General Abercrombie, who was a commander of the British forces in the years 1758 to 59.
Okay. Now this, I was thinking when I was looking at this, even today in a Rand McNally map, you look up any state, you have the little cities along the side. That's they doing the same thing there with that, with that one.
Truly.
And so would this map, would this have been just for geographical purposes, or was it a military?
Most of the maps drawn in the 1750s were military
Okay,
maps.
for military purposes.
Right.
Okay.
The collection at the British Library that I've encountered were part of a massive collection that King George II acquired. King George II was very interested in maps, very interested in military maps. He wanted to have copies of maps that showed his kingdom and domain, where his troops were also, so he could visualize where they were and what actual lands belonged to him.
Okay. And you were saying his collection was quite extensive. Is that what you were telling me?
Within the thousands. In fact, he died in 1760, and his son, King George III, picked up where he left off. Big map collector, and today, the collection of maps that are at the British Library are called the King George III Topographical Map Collection. And in there, you're going to find thousands upon thousands of maps. A lot of them from North America, a lot of them that haven't been seen in 250 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's my goal, is try to throw
Now,
some light on them.
You have to tell me this little story. Before we started, you told me this little story of one of the reasons you got interested in history and obviously maps. You were a retired state trooper, but when you were a trooper, those little blue historical markers, you got interested in those, and that piqued your interest in
Absolutely. And not only when I rode the road as a trooper, as a young kid, I was very interested in trying to take note of all the signs in the area I lived in. There were probably 50 or 60, in the counties up north.
Okay. Well, those things are they're still all around us.
Some have, apparently they did an audit a few years ago, and they're missing some.
Oh, okay.
And apparently when they did that, if they weren't on site, they took them off the list, which is a problem.
All right.
So I don't remember where the sites were.
Now, in the next one we have, do you have, what was it going to be next, the Albany one?
Yes. It's a map of upstate New York, the year 1758.
1758, and again, would have been for military.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be zooming in on this one, and we'll be able to. What are some of the things you want to point out on?
Well, basically, where we are today is on here. It's probably just a blank field, but you note the Hudson River moving north. A parallel road with it would be the military road moving north.
Okay.
Round Lake, Saratoga Lake.
Saratoga Lake, Round Lake. Okay.
Albany's down here, and then you have the Mohawk moving west.
Yeah.
It also shows the old Dutch homes by name. If you zoom in here, you see the Van Ardams, Schuyler's, which probably were homes that were built probably late 1600s, early 1700s, when the Dutch were prevalent in this area. But basically, the map shows the roads going north. Going north was what the British troops were constantly doing until the end of the French and Indian War, being the French were up there.
Okay. Now, what was, I want to ask you, in your research of this, how long do you know, how long would a map like that have taken to be made? And how many people would have been involved? I think when later on we're going to see some a little more elaborate that obviously 10, 15 people may have worked on.
Well, in the 1750s, when map making took off, basically the King of France and the King of England were competitive as to map making. The King of France set up schools, specially trained people to make maps.
Really?
In England, you're on your own. The King didn't set up schools for anyone. But basically, it became a commercial operation. Thomas Kitching was the cartographer for King George II. He got his start in making maps, basically making military maps. But what he found out is that people the regular public had interest in these maps also, so they found out that they could make money. So they commercially established map makers, by people that would engrave the maps, print the maps, and then hand color the maps. There were actual painters hired to sit in a room and specialized on painting lakes.
Okay.
They had specialists that painted
Yeah.
trees. But it was a multi-person endeavor, and was
Well,
pretty interesting.
we're talking before we started. People are still today totally very interested in maps. You see people all the time in maps. Now we have GPSs and Google Maps.
Right.
I was mentioning to Randy before we started, down in the internet here in the library, when I walk by, you always see people looking at these maps all the time. I think it's a human, it's some kind of human compulsion to look at maps or something. I'm not sure what.
Well, it's interesting because they didn't have GPS back then.
I know.
They basically did it with surveyors and chains.
Okay.
Measured distances that way. And it was also well known that they would steal each other's maps.
Really?
Information.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've read many accounts where they would basically forge a map based on someone else's.
Okay. Now later on,
commercials.
we'll probably see on some of these maps. There's one. We have a big one. Hopefully, we can show later of Lake Champlain, but it actually has things for troops like good landing or something like that, or
Right.
good spot to.
Yeah, that's a 1759 map
Okay.
of Champlain that was drawn for General Amherst.
Okay.
Basically, they mapped out the whole lake, all the coves that were able to land troops or would have been favorable to land troops.
Okay.
Looking at that map, it must have taken quite a while
And
to achieve that. It was a big manuscript map.
now this map here, like how long do you think that? Can you tell maybe how long that may have taken to make, or you're not really?
Well, there's
sure?
some color in it. The engraving is where all the work would be. The printing would be easy.
Okay.
Once they had it, and then it looks like someone did go in there and color the homes
Okay.
red. There is some red in it, but
All right. Well,
there's not a lot of color in it. Probably not a lot of.
Well, I think the next one here you have the city of Albany. That has a lot of color, and I think this is where we may be getting into maps as perhaps in its own way a work of art, maybe kind of. That's a fascinating map. So it's funny if you just point out where State Street is now, people probably don't even need to have anything else pointed out if they know the city.
Right here. It's St. Peter's Church,
Okay.
the Dutch Reformed Church, and the Straight Street Hill. And the
Okay.
fort is where the Capitol is today.
Okay, so Wendy, I think where the Tenbrook Mansion is you could probably spot it on there, right?
A little off.
Oh, it's over farther? How far out on the right? That's only
Not too far.
a couple blocks over from
Yeah.
State Street? All
I know
right.
when the Tenbrook Mansion was built in 1798, Clinton Avenue was the city limit, so it was
That-
outside.
okay, so
Yeah.
that's not, all right, that's not on there. So what are some of the things you could like to point? You have the wall of the fort there. You got the different colors. And now what would this, again, would this be a military kind of map? or just more of a-
it was a military complex.
Oh, that's right, it was Fort Warren?
Obviously, they had a fort there, and we're talking the ancientness of the city of Albany, but it was still a fortress because there was never a day to relax down there because they always feared the French or the Indians would come down. And so that's why it was fortified. There was an actual fort there. That goes back to the Dutch days. But the quality of the maps goes back to the fact that the maps ended up in the hands of the king.
That's right, you were telling me before.
Everything has to be done right.
Every map, or most of the ones that you have, even if you got it from the library, they all, made for the king's pleasure or something like that? Or they all went to the king? Is that what? Okay.
He had a big interest in maps and the engineers. He was good friends with the engineers, which is good for us.
Now this
He
map,
sent
where did this come? Does this come from Library of Congress or British Museum?
That came from the British Library.
From the British Library. Oh, okay. Now when you were over there, you were telling me it was humongous collection. Did they still have many from, say, colonial, our area? Colonial?
They have thousands.
Thousands, okay.
What impressed me the most when you go into the British Library, King George II and King George III's library is on display.
Okay.
It's 3 stories high. It's right, and then when you walk into the British Library, it's all enclosed in glass, surrounded in glass. When you
Yeah.
walk in, you see just nothing but books, 3 stories
Okay.
high within this glass case. that belonged to both kings. So they're very literate, and they read a lot, and the maps came with that. So it's very impressive.
Now, you were saying that the Library of Congress, we can go look, they're all online. Is the British Museum online? Can you look at maps there?
Yes.
Or? Okay.
British Library is online. Windsor Castle possess a very nice collection. They're not online.
Okay.
Right now, you can only, you get that by appointment. You have to write a letter to them to request permission to come in and look at a specific item. But well, the next 2 years, they're going to be online with their collection, hopefully.
All right. So I think the next one we have is at the Schenectady. This one is very detailed. And these are you were telling me, these are the original colors when they were made, right?
Yes.
You get them reproduced. This is just how it looked back in 17 whatever.
Right. Most of these maps we have in the United States, but they're not in color. We had a gentleman go over in the early 1900s and photograph in black and white a lot of these maps. My quest, because I have them in black and white, I knew that a majority of the maps were in color because they're listed as such. So my goal was to go after the maps, local maps here that are in color, so we can actually see what it represented, what the colors represented, and they look a lot more realistic.
Now, because these were mainly military, how were they sort of carried and preserved so that it wouldn't get? You were saying that the paper was pretty strong. It would last, well, obviously, hundreds of years. Or,
right. Yeah, it was. I don't know if they use vellum on some of the real higher end maps, but I know the paper, the watermarks are still visible. They have a musket and a powder horn on a lot of the paper, so it was stick grade. I've actually been able to see the originals, some of the originals, and it held up well.
So how did you, you were telling me you were very interested in history. How did you jump from being really interested in history, particularly French and Indian War, to sort of having a subspecialty in maps? How did you make that jump to maps?
Well, it was easy because the maps that I acquired made me go out and collect a book.
Okay, so you were...
To read about a specific incident. Some of the maps that I don't have here today depict battles that actually were fought. I wanted to know about.
You mean it would have like the lines of battle where they...
Yeah,
like,
the battle lines, and absolutely. There was one map down in King's Place that was fought in India. It was a French and Indian War battle between the French, British troops, and the Bengalese Nabob. And there were battle elephants attacking the British Army.
Really? Okay.
Which was pretty unique. So...
I didn't know the British that were in India then.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
That's eventually, with the French losing the war, England acquired the rights to India, basically as a colony.
So the French and the British have been fighting each other for
a long time.
So why don't you point out a few things on this Schenectady map that some of it obviously people will still know, but a couple of things you can.
This is a stockade.
Okay. Yeah.
State Street running toward Albany. You can see they're starting to build homes there.
Okay.
A lot of the British troops were sent here, specifically the Black Watch, the 42nd.
Okay.
They were sent out to Schenectady simply because the generals thought they were kind of Indian tribe on their own.
Okay.
They didn't speak English, but they felt they'd get along good with the Indians, which they did. Over here you have Glenn Sanders' mansion.
Okay, yeah.
Depicted here. I'm sure you've all had a good meal at the restaurant. But that's here. The reason that Sanders' home stayed so long is that when they burned Schenectady in 1690, his house was spared because he had helped the Jesuits.
Okay.
And the story goes that when we were taking prisoners to go north to Canada, Sanders came down and started pointing out his relatives so that they could be saved, and the French said, you don't have that many relatives. He tried to save the whole city. But anyway, he did do a lot of good. That's how his mansion ended up not getting burned in 1690.
Now, I notice on the right, I don't know if maybe we can zoom in on it, there is a little road or a line that just says, to the woods. Or something.
To the woods to Niskayuna.
Okay.
Right there.
That's on there.
We're still traveling those roads today.
And then you're saying that where that on the right there, that is actually Central Ave today, correct?
This road right here.
And it goes right, would go right to Albany.
That'd be the King's Highway.
Right, that's right.
It would run over to Gill and the back way, to Pine Bush.
All right. Now, the next one you have is very colorful. It's the, I think it's the northern tip of the Hudson River, or yeah. So this is like the northern end of the Hudson River, and then you see Lake George there.
Yeah.
And
Joshua Loring did this map, and he went on to play a pivotal role in the Revolution. But it starts down.
There's Albany down there, yeah.
Right. And you got the river coming north, and you have the military road here, which takes it all the way up to Fort Edward. And then you have the military road from here to Lake George, where Fort William Henry was still there in 1756.
Okay.
Fell in 1757.
All right. Now, if people were when people go down to the Tenbrook, the place across the street, what was the name of it again?
King's Place.
King's Place. You have 40 or 50?
48.
Now, what are the ones? Obviously, we don't have all 40 to show. What are some of the other ones that you could maybe talk a little bit about that people may pique their interest to go down there?
One of the more unique drawings down there was the Siege of Louisville. It was done by a Frenchman. That's when Wolfe made his name, basically, when the troops landed and took Louisville. It's a 3-panel map, hand-drawn, the most outstanding quality I've ever seen in a hand-drawn map. And it's got like a purple or mauve color to it now because they put a coat of shellac on it to preserve it, which was not a good thing. But it's just exquisite. When you go in there and look at the ships, the troops,
they actually drew the little ships on.
Actually drew the ships right to spec. Unbelievable.
Now, how big is that? Bigger than?
There's 3 panels probably this size.
All right. So,
but it's you have to really look close because the mauve color kind of throws you off. But you have to look through that.
Okay.
It's just an exquisite map.
Okay. Any other ones of particular interest?
They're all pretty nice. I mean, they're all.
Okay. Now, Wendy, what's people been going to this? What have people been saying that you've talked to that have gone to the?
I haven't heard a negative comment.
Okay.
I mean, everybody loves them. So.
Now, Randy, your collection, you were telling me before we started, at any given time, many of your hundreds of maps, they're on display sort of all over New York State, or people can ask you to show certain ones. Is that?
It's been out in Western New York State. It was at Fort Ontario for a couple of months. It's been like 4 different places. They take the collection for a couple of months. And
all of them, or just?
Yeah,
all of them.
And they put them up in a library or on display, and gave everybody a chance to get a look at the maps.
Okay. Now, I know the Prine House, they're over there for a month or so.
They'll be there until the middle of June.
Middle of June? Okay, they're going to stay, okay.
Absolutely.
All right, now, we're going to try and look at this, or we're going to look at this Lake Champlain map here now.
Listen to the title, it's a survey of Lake Champlain, and when you look at what was actually done and the man hours that went into creating this, it's just unbelievable. It would start down at Crown Point in this area here, where in 1759 the British ended up taking Fort St. Frederick and build a fort there. It was never named, it was just a fort at Crown Point. But what this map does, it goes the whole length of Champlain.
And Lake Champlain is about how long is that, like 30, 40 miles?
Absolutely, no, it's more than that.
Oh,
probably if you count this waterway here as part of it. But it's more acclimated to landing troops and hiding troops and canoes or whatever, and that's why if you run down through the sides there, he marked it in many locations that it was good for landing, good for troops.
But it actually says good for troops on there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Oh,
yes, I think we discussed it. I think Burlington's around here, I think, today.
Okay. And you're saying now this map, you can see the fold marks in it. That's the actual size of the map that the general would have carried with him?
Yes. This map would have been folded, what, 1, 2, 3,
I mean, that's
6 times.
But it's about 6 feet tall, I would think.
Yeah, it's...
Now, is this typical of the kind, or is this more you think this is one that's an exception to
A little
the?
more flamboyant,
Okay.
I would say, probably showing off for the king.
Okay.
But it's very impressive nonetheless, and only because the lake is so big that
Yeah.
it probably necessitated extending it like that and in that size. But Joshua Loring, the one that I showed you here, also did a map of Lake George where he actually did soundings, the depth soundings. in it.
Okay.
And that's a pretty nice map too.
Oh, okay.
But
Wow. This has been quite, and like I say, we've only seen, what do we see, 6 maps? Well, this is quite interesting. So if you want to see, there's 40 or so down at across the street from the Tenbrook. I keep saying that, I keep forgetting. And there's a smaller collection of about 20 or so over at the Prying House until, when did you say that was there till?
I'd say mid-June.
Till the mid-June or so. So if you want to get over there, and I saw the Prying House exhibit, it's very interesting. There's all different kinds of maps, various sizes, and some are very detailed, some are bigger, like the Lake Champlain. So anything else you want to add there, Randy? This is thanks for coming and bringing all your...
Anybody that wants to attempt to do this can do it. There's really nothing special. It's a little bit of hard work, but you get the maps online. You can download them, get your own printed copies, or do it with your own maps that you might possess. But very satisfying.
Okay.
What's satisfying is seeing the interest that other people have.
Okay.
And
All
looking
right.
at them.
Well, thanks for showing us. Wendy, thanks again.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, well, that is it for this time, and we'll see you next time.